Easily the most iconic country music romance of all time, Johnny Cash and June Carter had a love story that emerged from the highs and lows of fame. Their love began on the road, and what started off as a complicated affair between two touring musicians became one of the most enduring and celebrated romances in country music history. This is the love story of Johnny and June. In this video, we take it all the way back, from how they crossed paths to when they passed away, exploring the bond that not only survived the storm of their crazy lives, but created a romantic legacy that's still talked about today. Before they became Johnny and June, they were simply John Cash and June Carter. Johnny had a very humble upbringing, while June was fortunate enough to have been born into a country music family. June Carter was born in Macy Springs, Virginia in 1929 into the legendary Carter family, pioneers of American country music. By the age of 10, June was already performing with her mother Maybelle and her sisters Helen and Anita. She toured the country, captivated audiences with her iconic sense of humor, and made a name for herself on the Grand Ole Opry stage. Whereas Johnny Cash, born in rural Arkansas in 1932, grew up in the cotton fields, listening to artists like the Carter family on the radio. All he had to keep him sane growing up was music. He'd listen to the radio almost every day and loved to hear June Carter's voice.
Guess which Carter that is? Anita? Nope.
That's fine. That was a little 10-year-old June singing for you.
His youth was marked by hard work and tragedy, especially the death of his beloved older brother Jack. Jack was a role model to Johnny, but one day working a sawmill to support the family, he was mortally wounded and later passed at their farmhouse with Johnny by his side. That pain of loss he endured would end up shaping the soul-searching music he'd later become famous for, and the soul he was truly searching for would later appear in his life. While in the Air Force, Johnny still kept his passion for music alive. Because he couldn't always tune into the radio, he'd collect music magazines and read about current artists, including June Carter, who he gravitated to for her good looks and charm. After getting out of the military, Johnny ended up marrying Vivian Liberto. They'd met before he shipped off on his 3-year deployment to Germany, and he kept in close contact via mail and on the phone whenever possible. They ended up having 4 daughters, but even as he built a family with her after returning home and getting out of the Air Force, Cash was chasing a dream, one that took him to Memphis, where he'd sign his first record deal and earn his place in the spotlight. As Johnny Cash began to live an exciting and fast-paced life, over time it led him to grow distant from his wife Vivian. But it also gave him the opportunity to meet someone more compatible and someone that he would fall deeper in love with than ever. In 1956, Johnny Cash made his debut at the Grand Ole Opry. Backstage, he met the woman he'd admired since childhood, June Carter, then still married to her first husband and country star Carl Smith. June recalls being mesmerized by Johnny's dark eyes and commanding stage presence that night, saying, "Those black eyes shone like agates. He had a command of his performance that I had never before, just a guitar and a bass and a gentle kind of presence that made not only me, but whole audiences become his followers." In the early 60s, June found her place with Cash on tour as a backup singer. She was witty, grounded, and brought a perfect balance to Johnny's demeanor. Audiences loved them together, and backstage, so did they. Well, at least Johnny. At first, June didn't let Johnny win over her heart so easily. This was because both were married at the time, with June now being married to her second husband, Edwin Nix. June was very reluctant to fall for another man. As June would later say in an interview with Rolling Stone, "It wasn't a convenient time for either of us to fall in love, but it was just like a ring of fire," referring to the song she helped write and let Johnny turn into a smash hit.
I fell into a ring of fire.
Despite June's reluctance, Johnny and June had more than just a working relationship at the time they were both still married. It was not something they were proud of, and they did their best to hide it for years. June was especially cautious to enter in a relationship with Johnny because not only was it scandalous, but she'd already been frowned upon by fans for going through a divorce with her first husband in 1956, shortly after meeting Johnny for the first time. Divorce was considered an abomination at the time, and she lost respect from many of her fans. The truth was that her marital expectations weren't being met with Carl Smith, and that she felt her true love was still out there. The reason she found a second husband before Johnny was that at the time of her first divorce, she hadn't yet begun touring with Cash, so she looked for love elsewhere to fill the void. She ended up marrying her second husband a year after her first divorce. When Johnny and June began touring together, Johnny's career was really starting to take off. He loved playing with June in the spotlight and wished that he had more time with her off stage. There was something about June that he couldn't live without. Her charisma, her beauty, and her common love for making country music. Although Johnny was married to Vivian until 1966, he began to feel lonely on tour since he was spending so much time away from home. Vivian also was becoming less supportive of his ambitions because it kept him away from her while she had to raise their 4 daughters on her own. Despite Johnny's quick rise to fame, all through the 60s his personal life began to fall apart. He developed a severe addiction to pills and alcohol, underwent multiple arrests, and often missed shows because of it. His marriage to Vivian was slowly collapsing, and his situation was starting to look unrecoverable. This was also around the time he began a full-fledged affair with June Carter. June was facing similar struggles in her marriage and started to realize that Johnny was the man she'd been looking for all along. Meanwhile, her husband, Edwin, was urging her to take a step back from her career and stay home with the family. It wasn't until 1966 that Vivian finally became fed up with Johnny's behavior and caught on to his close relationship with June Carter, citing a suspected affair as one of her grounds for divorce filing, along with Johnny Cash's uncontrollable addiction to drugs. Their divorce coincided with June's divorce to Edwin Nix. Before long, the two found themselves single again, but they were anything but ready to enter in a public relationship with one another. Johnny was madly addicted to pills by this point, and June was deeply ashamed that she now had 2 divorces under her belt.
I'll tell him you said that.
I'm surprised they still speak to you. Divorce is an abomination. Marriage, it's for life.
I'm sorry I let you down, ma'am.
June kept her divorce with Edwin quiet for 3 months, even with Johnny in the band. But she knew that Johnny needed her to open up to him. He had feelings for her and he needed someone to save him from the disastrous consequences of his behavior. June finally opened up to Johnny about the divorce and began helping him sober up from his drug problem. After Johnny's divorce, he moved to a Nashville apartment with Waylon Jennings, leaving their house in California to Vivian and the children. He began falling wildly in love with June. He would call her regularly and try to spend time with her whenever possible. Johnny was confident that he would marry June, for good this time. In fact, he was so confident that in 1966 he bought an unfinished property on Old Hickory Lake, Tennessee, as a preemptive wedding gift for June. But as he began to move in as the house's construction was wrapping up, he found himself alone in a big house with no one to comfort him despite being on top of the country music world. He longed for June more than ever and would frequently call her in attempts to get her to visit him. June eventually budged and started spending more time with him at the house. It was there that she helped Johnny cure his drug addiction for good, working hard to dispose of his hidden pills and keep herself and her parents around him for comfort.
Where's my pills?
Flushed him out.
Junior, don't say that.
At this point in time, Johnny had very irregular sleep schedules and sporadic behavior during his withdrawal. But June stayed by his side. She even invited family over to Johnny's new house to comfort him. Johnny always credited June for helping him get clean, often saying that she saved his life.
The only person who would really know how I suffered would be June Carter, and she suffered along with me and fought it with me.
I became a thief. I stole pills. I stole hotel keys. I did everything that I could, and I did things that I would have never done ordinarily, but I think I did it only because I didn't know what else to do. I thought he would die.
Johnny getting sober was a spiritual experience, and it's rumored that he went through extreme measures to complete the journey, with June by his side. One account, which is questioned by bibliographers but talked about by Johnny's family and friends, was a particularly life-changing moment for him. The story goes that one day, Johnny told June he was going to visit Nickajack Cave, just a short drive south of his new house. He told her he wanted to get away from the chaos of life for a bit. June was suspicious but didn't hold Johnny back from going. As many recovering drug addicts experience, Johnny was having suicidal thoughts. His plan that day was to crawl into the cave and keep going until his flashlight flickered out, so he wouldn't be able to find his way back.
And my flashlight completely burned out, and it was black dark, so dark you could feel it. And I lay down flat on my back and said my goodbye prayers. I felt a presence, and that inner voice almost said, no, you don't give up. But I clawed my way back up, And just as I was about to give up, I saw a little fleck of light way off in the distance, and I started crawling and clawing toward that entrance. I woke up and June was washing my face, and she said, "You're almost dead, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, call Nat Winston, I want to live."
This story highlights how dramatic Johnny's recovery was, and how June was always there to support him along the way. June would always work to take care of Johnny when he couldn't seem to take care of himself, making sure he was fed and well rested during the recovery process. After going through moments like these and spending time with his true love, June, Johnny started to build back his relationship with God that he had lost since childhood. Along with June's encouragement, both started attending church services again. Him and June found a new and stronger relationship with God and worked together to earn forgiveness for their sins and better themselves together as human beings. All throughout the recovery process, Johnny was constantly trying to get June to marry him because he appreciated her so much. But June was reluctant to enter into marriage with him until he fully sobered up. It's reported that Johnny proposed to June over 30 times before finally giving in front of a crowd of 7,000 fans in 1968. They were married just 8 days later and never looked back. They had a son together, John Carter Cash, and continued to tour and perform, winning Grammys together in 1971, starring in The Johnny Cash Show, and recording legendary duets like If I Were a Carpenter and The Loving Gift.
If I were a carpenter and you were a lady, would you marry me anyway? Would you have my baby?
They weren't perfect. They were human, flawed but finding new faith in each other and God. They were deeply in love throughout their entire marriage. Their interactions with each other were as romantic as it gets. Unconditional was the word Cash often used to describe the love he had for June. They never gave up on each other and stayed together until death did them part. On June's 65th birthday, Johnny wrote to her what has been deemed by many as the most romantic love letter of all time. It reads,
"We get old and get used to each other. We think alike. We read each other's minds. We know what the other wants without asking. Sometimes we irritate each other a little bit. Maybe sometimes take each other for granted. But once in a while, like today, I meditate on it and realize how lucky I am to share my life with the greatest woman I ever met. You still fascinate and inspire me. You influence me for the better. You're the object of my desire, the number one earthly reason for my existence. I love you very much."
Johnny Cash and June Carter were married for 35 years. When June passed away in May of 2003, Johnny followed just 4 months later. His official cause of death was complications from diabetes, but those closest to him say it was heartbreak that truly claimed him. He stopped taking care of himself, and without June, there was no more fire in his heart to keep going. Their story was so powerful that it inspired an Oscar-winning film, Walk the Line, and countless love songs. But the real magic wasn't in Hollywood. It was in their songs, their struggles, their stage presence, and their loyalty to each other. Through fire and fame and temptation and tragedy, Johnny and June chose each other, again and again and again. And in doing so, they gave us not just music, but a blueprint for love that endures to today.